The end is near for these Dynasty fantasy football running backs. Welcome back, fellas. Every year, I break down the running backs in fantasy football from a redraft to Dynasty, a best ball landscape, and we go over kind of who do we expect to maybe fall off from an age perspective, and also that comes along with maybe we should sell some of these guys in Dynasty, maybe we could avoid some of these guys in redraft. This year's really, really unique because the older running backs, long are the days where, a 28-year-old running back's going to be like RB3 in Dynasty after a middling RB2 season. It doesn't happen anymore. People are wise to older running backs falling off. And also, too, uniquely, we're coming off of a year where all of the older running backs smashed. We had Henry finish as a top 5 guy. Barkley finishes the RB1. Kamara and Mixon and all those guys finishes RB1s as well. So this one's going to be a really unique conversation, going to be a ton of fun to get into. As I say every year, however long you think a former stud running back has left in the tank, it's usually about a year less than you probably think they'll go for. So if you think Alvin Kamara's got 2 to 3 more years left in the tank, chances are he's got 1 or 2 more years left in the tank. So first of all, I just want to go over this point because I'm going to talk about it from like a redraft frame of mind in a couple weeks, probably next week or so. There's a lot of downside risk with running backs across the board. You're only as good as your production, especially if you're above the age of like 25, 26 years old from a dynasty frame of mind, because once you're not producing, you're no longer valuable on the market if you're an older running back. And when we look at a redraft frame of mind, of the top 20 running backs in ADP and redraft every year, 1 in 5 get hurt, meaning they miss 6 or more games. 1 in 5 bust, meaning they lose 10 or more spots of ADP. So you draft them RB6, they finish like RB20 or something. And then over 1 every 5 are kind of just fine, meaning you draft them RB6, they finish RB13. They didn't kill you, but they didn't really help you win either. So that if you're doing the math there, that's over 60% of the time, or about 60% of the time, that you're disappointed with the running back that you drafted. And I'm talking early in redraft. Top 5, top 6 rounds is where about the top 20 running backs in ADP go. So when we're picking these running backs, or when we're holding these running backs, when we're trading these running backs in Dynasty, we got to keep in mind that if they're older especially, and they don't hold up to the volume, or they don't get the volume, or they can't score fantasy points because their offense sucks or their offensive line sucks or whatever, you're inherently exposing yourself to more risk. And the downside risk really starts to outweigh the upside the worse the situation is. That number, when you talk about specifically older running backs, which is what we're focusing on in this video, that number goes from a clean 60% to exactly 66.67% of the time, or 2/3 of every one of those older running backs is going to disappoint you in some form or fashion, whether it's them getting injured, them busting, or them being just fine and not killing you. So, of course, price factors in. Betting on older running backs 5 years ago was a lot worse of an idea because they were going higher in redraft, going higher in Dynasty. And now most Dynasty players, most redraft players understand the inherent risk of drafting older running backs and holding them as, RB25 in Dynasty, as opposed to RB11 or something like they would have been in 2016. If we were talking about these older guys, you couldn't get James Conner, Alvin Kamara level production for mid-seconds in Dynasty 5 years ago. You had to pay first rounders for that type of production. The age is baked in for the most part. But it's still important to know when to get out on these running backs, specifically from a dynasty frame of mind, and also when you don't want to draft these guys anymore in redraft because you don't want dead assets on your roster, and of course you don't want to miss on your redraft picks. So we want our league mates basically to be drafting these guys in their fall off season, and we're going to do our best to try and predict which running backs this year are slated to fall off. We've already seen some of the 2017 running back class, that historic class, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, and Leonard Fournette. Those guys have already fallen off. Kareem Hunt as well, Chris Carson, all those guys have already fallen off from that draft class, but we do still have a couple guys still kicking. A few years ago, I conducted a study when formerly elite running backs fall off. Only multi-time RB1s were included in this study, so guys who are really, really good fantasy assets at one point in their career. I update it every single year. You can see a large number of running backs in here. Anybody highlighted in yellow are Hall of Famers or have been finalists to be in the Hall of Fame. On average, in their fall-off season, they scored 5.97 fewer fantasy points per game than their previous season before their fall-off, and they finished on average 18.1 spots worse than when they were being drafted. So if you were drafted, let's say RB12, which was the average these guys were drafted at, and you finished RB30, then you were about in line with the averages of these fall off seasons. And of course, they lost a lot of spots in Dynasty, about 20 spots of Dynasty running back ADP on average. The age and touch apex, so when this happened for these running backs, on average was 28.3 years old at about 1,600 career touches. And if you take out some of the Hall of Famers, because there was a couple huge outliers in there, like Steven Jackson and Frank Gore, LaDainian Tomlinson, some of these guys played a long time at a very, very high level, which is why they're getting Hall of Fame votes or already wearing gold jackets. If we remove the Hall of Famers from that sample, the new number was a 5.9 point per game drop-off, 19.4 ADP drop-off in redraft, 18.5 at running back in Dynasty, and the new age and touch apex was 27.9 years old, 1,361 career touches. In years past, I've talked about, maybe the older school running backs were a little bit more durable than the newer school running backs, but it started to balance itself out over the years because with the use of running back by committees, which people didn't use in 2005 for Jamal Lewis, they just gave him every single touch they wanted. It's allowing guys to play longer, which we're seeing from Alvin Kamara, we're seeing from Christian McCaffrey, we're seeing from Aaron Jones, and some of these guys who were maybe preserved a little bit earlier on in their career. So let's use age 28 and 1,350, give or take, touches as the measuring stick for the danger zone. Because like I said, around 1,600 career touches if you include the Hall of Famers, and about 28 years old, 27.9 and 1,361 touches when you exclude the Hall of Famers. Give or take, that's the range that we're talking about when running backs start to fall off on average. These are the active touch leaders among fantasy relevant running backs. You can see the king at the very top there with 2,500 career touches. Absolutely absurd what he's doing, and he is absolutely going to be wearing a gold jacket someday, as probably is Christian McCaffrey, who's down at 1,871 touches, and a couple more good years out of some of these other guys, they might be as well. Saquon, Alvin Kamara, some of these guys definitely still have a chance to be wearing gold jackets too. But don't let last year fool you. This is the number one point of this entire video. Last year, we saw an absurd renaissance of older running backs having great years. There are a ton of dudes in the danger zone right now, and last year was the second time in 10 years, according to Ryan Heath of Fantasy Points, that more of the top 30 running backs in ADP stayed healthy relative to the top 30 wide receivers in ADP. And the percentage of running backs versus wide receivers staying healthy was also the widest gap it's ever been since 2015. You can see of the top 30 running backs in ADP, 63% played at least 15 games. Of the top 30 wide receivers in ADP, only 50% played at least 15 games. So we actually saw a really weird outlier season where running backs were unusually healthy. Wide receivers, not so much. One of the lowest points, in fact, the lowest point since 2015 of wide receiver injuries. So it was a running back renaissance like no other. So this is the time to take advantage of that historical outlier. Let's answer the question, who's likely to fall off? Let's take some stances here. If I don't see evidence of a fall off, I'm not going to just say somebody's going to fall off because I'm not an idiot. If somebody's playing at a super high level, I'm not going to just say you should sell that guy as a dynasty contender. They're probably fine at cost in redraft. If I do see evidence of a fall off, though, you should probably be actively selling some of these players for market value, use them to get younger, so on and so forth. Also from Ryan Heath, who does excellent work for Fantasy Points. I've had him on the channel before. Running back fantasy performance by age. You can see I've highlighted the number 9 there. In year 9, which is the year of the 2017 running back class, which historically produced a lot of guys, you can see a very large statistical drop-off from year 7 to year 8, and then year 8 again, then to year 9. So keep in mind that we might see a couple more of these guys fall off. And like I said, some of them already have. Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook. Some of those guys in that historic class have already started to fall off. So let's start up top with Derrick Henry, the king, most active touches among any running back in the league. Well, he's not going to fall off anytime soon. And the reason I say that is because he's coming off of his highest rushing grade, highest yards per carry, second highest touchdown total, second highest rushing yardage total, and is being drafted as a top 7 running back in fantasy. He is reasonably priced in Dynasty at RB 19. 5-6 years ago, he would be the RB 5 or 6 in Dynasty right now. So you're getting a discount because of the age. And there is absolutely zero evidence that he has lost a step. There is no indication a fall off is coming anytime soon. He's also a future Hall of Famer, set to be an outlier in this sample, and yet another projected elite workload, projected elite offense, very great opportunity in front of him. So I am not going to sit here and say that Derrick Henry is going to fall off this year, because there is no evidence to point me in that direction other than the fact that he has 2,500 career touches. He is playing at a super high level. So I'm not going to be the dumbass who says sell Derrick Henry, he's going to fall off this year, because if he does, there was no indication that he was going to, other than the fact that he has a lot of touches. And of course, he's 32 years old. We can also, to save us some time, probably rule out Saquon Barkley coming off of his best season or his second best season. Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor, who are starting to enter the danger zone in terms of touches and age, they're coming off of either both of their second best years in fantasy as well. So I don't think they're going to be falling off anytime soon. But again, they are entering the danger zone, so keep that in mind from a dynasty perspective. The real conversations are the ones that we're going to go through now. Joe Mixon's numbers on the surface look normal. If you look at what he did last year relative to like PFF rushing grade, his yards per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, relatively speaking, in line with what he's done throughout his career. But when you dig deeper at his 2024 season and look at what he did the first 10, 11 games of the year, 21.38 carries per game, rushed for 100 plus yards 6 out of 8 times, and 11 out of 14 of his total touchdowns came during that first 11-week stretch of the year. It was an 8-game sample size, and of course, he did miss a little bit of time with an ankle injury. When you look at week 12 onward, 12.83 carries per game, 3.36 yards per carry, and no more than 3 targets in any single game, only 12.1 fantasy points per game during that stretch. His lowest reception total in 4 years. They add Woody Marks in the draft, who's going to maybe take away some of that receiving workload that Joe Mixon has thrived off of. Mixon, for years, has been a workload play. He gets the touches, he gets the volume. That's what he's been. He has not been an overly efficient running back. And they also add Nick Chubb, who, of course, is a formerly elite fantasy running back himself, now 2 years removed from a major injury, and he could threaten some of that early down work, some of that goal line work. Maybe Nick Chubb is washed. Maybe Woody Marks isn't a factor in this backfield, but when you factor in that Mixon had a noticeable fall off down the stretch last year, and he is well above the age and touch apex where you want to be at 2,100 career touches and 29 years old, I am not drafting Joe Mixon this year, because there is enough factors here, in addition to the fact that, by the way, the Texans might have the worst offensive line in football, lost their only good offensive lineman in Laramie Tunsil to a trade to the Washington Commanders, and were already a bottom 5 offensive line last year. I am selling him right now at low-end RB2 dynasty price tags where he's going, and you should let your league mates draft him in redraft and in best ball. An early to mid-second or a similarly valued younger back like an Isaiah Pacheco, like a Brian Robinson. If you want to get really young, you could go for like a Charbonnet or a Tootin or a Benson if you're rebuilding. That's what I'd be looking to sell at running back for Joe Mixon. Or you could just go after, draft capital in early to mid projected second. Get him off your team. A contender will probably want his production. I am not looking to hold Joe Mixon through this storm, because I do think it's possible we see a big fall off. And like I said, when the player sees a fall off and the actual projection has warts like it does, the receiving upside, the workload, the offensive line, that kind of stuff, that's when I'm definitely going to be selling. And Joe Mixon is one of those guys that I'm going to be selling. Let's talk about Alvin Kamara. Nothing abnormal about his numbers either. You can see, relatively speaking, he's been the same level of efficiency, yards after contact per attempt. There's no real metrics we can point to that says he fell off either. And oh, by the way, he was the RB5 in fantasy points per game last year, and he can do it again. Because even if the Saints are bad, which they were last year and they project to be again, they actually project as one of the league's worst offenses according to Vegas projections, and they are the current betting favorite to get the number 1 pick in the draft. He led all running backs with 89 targets last year and no visible fall off as a receiver, was a top 3 running back in fantasy points per game with over 20 points per game when he had Derek Carr healthy. So if you factor in that maybe the offense could be a little better, maybe it's as good as it was with Derek Carr, maybe we get some semblance of functional quarterback play, then he has a 20-point per game ceiling. And if Kamara gets that, if he gets the receiving work, which it doesn't seem like he wouldn't, there's nothing evident that he won't be a stud yet again. And this is what I talked about earlier. Kamara has never been a workhorse on the ground. And it's maybe preserving his late season, late career upside, because he can still be an effective receiving back and still get a lot of attempts. I like Devin Neal. I don't really, but some people like Kendre Miller. But I can draft Alvin Kamara at his cost in redraft, which is about a 4th, 5th round pick, and I can hold him in Dynasty and still take my shots on Devin Neal in case I'm wrong. I can just, okay, I'm going to trust that Kamara hasn't fallen off yet. I like the PPR production. I play primarily in PPR leagues. And if I'm wrong, I'll take some swings on 18th round Devin Neal. I'll stash him in Dynasty and I'll cover my bases there. That's how I'm handling Alvin Kamara, because there has been no evidence of a fall off noticeably in his play. Now let's get into the big one, which is Christian McCaffrey. He is virtually impossible to figure out, because when you look at Christian McCaffrey, when he was last fully healthy, he was one of the best running backs in football, a first-team All-Pro, and it was the second best season of his highly decorated future Hall of Fame career. Last year, we can't really take anything away from what happened other than they kept this injury silent the entire offseason. And then before week 1 happens, they randomly announce that he's going to be out, and he plays just like 4 games, noticeably was really bad on the field when he played. But was that just injury, or was that a sign of things to come? The 2 best indicators for injury are past injury and age. So when you look at Christian McCaffrey, a number of seasons cut short by injury, the fact that we went all off season last year without finding out that he was injured the entire time, it makes me worried, man. If Christian McCaffrey is on your Dynasty roster, you're probably a contender. You probably feel like you have to hold him, because if he booms and he has his monster 22 plus point per game ceiling like he does, you can't cash out knowing that you could have had that on your roster. But for me, what I'm willing to do with Christian McCaffrey is tier up to a younger asset, try and sell off for picks, because let's say you sell Christian McCaffrey off for a 1st and a 2nd round pick, which is what his current market value is according to our trade calculator over on the site. He is a house of cards asset. Anytime he deals with injury, whether it's in training camp, in the preseason, during the regular season, say week 3, he looks like a league winner weeks 1 and 2, and then in week 3 he suffers an ankle sprain, there goes his tradability. Nobody's going to buy him for what you could have possibly sold him for. But if you sell him for a 1 and a 2 right now, you could go buy an equally, maybe not quite as equally valuable ceiling play at running back like Breece Hall for a much younger player with much less injury risk. So Christian McCaffrey to me is a shop in Dynasty. He is a probable avoid in redraft, because I think everybody assumes that it's either he's going to crush or he's going to get hurt. Those are the only 2 outcomes that anybody is thinking through in their mind right now. Well, what about option 3? What about he plays 15 games and he isn't quite the same level of dominant, and he has 16 fantasy points per game and is RB11 in fantasy? Nobody seems to think that it's possible he could do that. But again, multi-time RB1s who are Hall of Fame caliber, like Christian McCaffrey, or includes a sample of running backs who are Hall of Fame caliber, fall off around 28.3 years old, 1,650 career touches. Christian McCaffrey is 29.2 years old with just shy of 1,900 career touches. And I actually think that all 3 outcomes for him are equally likely. Outcome 1, 23 plus points per game. He's a league winner and he's one of the best running backs in fantasy. 33% chance, give or take. Outcome 2, gets injured, misses a bunch of time. 33% likely, in my opinion. Outcome 3, falls off from a play standpoint, but actually stays healthy, gives you decent production, is just fine, maybe a silent killer archetype of running back. Equally likely. So for me, 66% of the time, he probably disappoints you from what you're expecting. And that means in Dynasty, I'm selling for rookie pick equity. I'm selling to try and tier up to Bucky Irving, to Breece Hall, to Trevion Henderson, something like that. And in redraft, at 7.5 overall ADP on Underdog, I'm going to be selling him and not taking him at that point. But if he falls to the 1-2 turn in your home redraft league, to me, that's the point in time where you want to be taking that risk. So Christian McCaffrey, very interesting conversation. Definitely let me know down below in the comments. Are you guys taking the risk? Are you not taking the risk? I'm okay taking some risk. I'll take 6-7% Christian McCaffrey in Best Ball Mania, but I don't want to overexpose myself to this guy. And in Dynasty, I'm really kind of averse to holding him in that position, given that I think he has a lot. I only think he has like 1 more really great year left in the tank. And also, I do think it's possible that we saw a little bit of a fall off, but it's being masked as he was banged up, he was hurt. What if the fact that he got banged up so easily is part of said fall off, like it was for Todd Gurley a couple of years ago? So Aaron Jones, another guy that in the sample has already actually fallen off, according to, when he was a multi-time RB1, 2019 through 2022, he was an RB1 every year that year. Then he goes to a low-end RB or a high-end RB3 2 years ago and a low-end RB2 last year. So he's kind of settled himself and aged gracefully that he's still fantasy relevant. He's still producing at a decent level, but he's not producing at the level he was producing before. The nice thing about Aaron Jones is that it's baked into his price. You can get this guy for a late second round pick, maybe even less, in a dynasty format, and his ADP on Underdog is RB28, about a 7th, 8th, 9th round pick. So it's not like you're paying super, super high cost for Aaron Jones, but if you pop the hood, his rush grade dipped to the lowest point in his career. His elusive rating dipped to the lowest point since his rookie season. His yards after contact per attempt dipped to his lowest point since his rookie season. And his missed tackles force rate, his career average was 20%. It was down to 18% on his carries last year. The Aaron Jones fall off may be upon us. Mason was brought in. They traded for him. They extended him. Although I've been of the opinion that Jordan Mason is probably just a handcuff to Aaron Jones as long as Aaron Jones is healthy, and generally speaking, I still think that's correct. Betting on a proven handcuff like Mason, what we saw him do when Christian McCaffrey was out, for a guy who's behind a 30-year-old running back who missed 6 games 2 years ago and has 1,800 career touches under his belt, that seems like a good idea. So if you guys have Aaron Jones and you're not contending or you're a fringe contender, sell him for a mid to late second. If you're a contending team and you wanted to buy him for a late second, I think that's also wise too. I'm kind of halfway in the middle on Aaron Jones. I could see him having another mid to low end RB2 season, but the Vikings are projected to be a worse team. Jordan Mason's breathing down his neck. It doesn't look great for Aaron Jones. Let's just put it that way. If you can get him for cheap, for contenders, 15th round startup pick or something, absolutely. But if he is going to cost you a pretty penny because of name value, then I would probably sell him at that point. James Conner, also a very hard guy to figure out because dude is aging like fine wine right now. This one is going to be hard to if he falls off, nobody's going to see it coming because the challenging variable with James Conner is that they drafted his replacement already. In the 3rd round last year, they took Trey Benson, who was my RB1 in last year's class, and a raw but athletic freak who's really gifted, who can be a 3-down back with some development. And I expect him to be a bigger threat this year than he was last year because as a prospect, he had some vision issues, some patience issues. He needed to learn from a veteran like James Conner, and he's done that for a calendar year. But on the flip side, because I've been very pro Trey Benson before, I love what Josh Norris of Underdog always says about James Conner, which is I don't think fantasy slappies like myself, who are hyping up Trey Benson right now, understand how valuable James Conner is to the Arizona Cardinals' success as a team, as an offense, in general. Because he has been so good since he's been in Arizona. So if I have to take a stance, I think my stance on James Conner is that this is the swan song year. He has another great season. Maybe towards the end of the year, it tapers off. Maybe he gets hurt at the end of the year. Or maybe after this season, he retires, hangs it up, and it's Trey Benson's backfield going forward. Again, do I think he'll be as good as last year? Maybe not quite, because I think Benson will be a little bit more involved. But for an age 30 running back with 1,642 career touches under his belt, Father Time is undefeated. It would not shock me if James Conner, who has never played a full season in his career, suffered an injury and missed a lot of time this year. It would not shock me if his efficiency fell off this year. But I do actually think, from a redraft, short-term projection standpoint, the Cardinals could be quite good. I think Kyler could have a nice bounce-back season. Marvin could take a step forward. Trey McBride's obviously a stud. They're actually projected for the 9th most points in the league, according to Vegas implied point totals, weeks 1 through 17. More than Cincinnati, more than Dallas, more than Green Bay, more than the Chargers, more than the Broncos, more than the Dolphins. They're projected for more total points as an offense than the teams that I just named. So while I can look at James Conner and go, there's absolutely nothing here that indicates he could fall off, I also tend to think that this will probably be his last great season, at least in Arizona. Maybe he moves on to a different team, but I do think Benson will nip at his heels enough to the point that the Cardinals will want to move on from Conner after this season, especially if there's any signs of injury, any signs of a decline, any signs of a fall off. I would say if you're a contender, you should be willing to deal about a mid-second round pick for James Conner right now. If you have to pay close to a first-round caliber asset, I wouldn't do it, but if you are selling and you can get a first-round asset, I would do it. But generally speaking, contenders should keep him. They should hold him for the swan song or buy him for a mid-second round pick if they need running back help. David Montgomery is also an interesting topic of conversation because he's running back 23 in Dynasty right now, which is not cheap for a 28-year-old running back, and running back 21 in redraft as well, going off the board around 6th, 7th round on Underdog. Last year, everything went right for David Montgomery. The NFL leader in scoring Detroit Lions was how good their offense was, 34 points a game. They won 15 games. They had to score a lot because their defense suffered so many injuries. And he had an elite O-line to run behind, Ben Johnson at the height of his powers, drawing up great plays, trick plays, efficient offense all together. I'm not worried about David Montgomery's play falling off because generally speaking, very similar to what I said about Connor and some of the other guys, nothing really suggests that he fell off as a running back last year because he had, relatively speaking, pretty good efficiency. What I'm worried about is this, the compounding factors of the offense being so unsustainably successful without Ben Johnson, without their all-pro center Frank Ragnow, who retired, who definitely is going to affect David Montgomery the most because he's the grinder in between the tackles, and also the fact that Jamison Williams was super efficient stretching the field. What if that doesn't continue? What happens if David Montgomery, with Gibbs entering year 3, loses opportunities? David Montgomery was so efficient as a receiver last year that of his 36 targets, he caught 34 of them for his most receiving yards in his career. He was so efficient on his receiving work. What if that doesn't continue? And again, Jahmyr Gibbs entering year 3, his opportunities, while they haven't really gone up a ton from year 1 to year 2 in his career so far, in the back half of last season and the back half of his rookie season, he jumped from a 24th rated at running back utilization score last year to 4th in the back half of the season. And yes, David Montgomery was banged up. Some of those games came without him, but he's only getting more dominant. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the premier superstar running backs in the NFL. And it wouldn't shock me if David Montgomery just gets overshadowed by one of the best young running backs in the league, and it relegates him more to handcuff status as opposed to handcuff with this elite standalone RB2 upside type of role. And to me, that's not baked into his price. He's finishing as a mid RB2 when everything breaks right for him. He's being drafted right now as a mid to late RB2. So for me, the changes to the offense, the fact that a back-end RB2 ceiling is probably what I see now without Ben Johnson, without Frank Ragnow, and the fact that without a Gibbs injury, he doesn't have a huge ceiling, I would say he probably is going a little too early. RB21 is a high price tag to pay despite being 28 years old with 1,520 career touches under his belt. He goes RB23 off the board in Dynasty as well. James Conner, Alvin Kamara cost about the same. So if you're looking for production, get the better production out of those guys. Brian Robinson, Isaiah Pacheco go for about the same but are younger. So go for the production and the age discrepancy there. And I do think Pacheco outproducing Montgomery wouldn't shock me. Brian Robinson outproducing David Montgomery wouldn't shock me. As much as I still think he's a good running back, I am worried about some of these factors. So let's talk about the last big one that we're going to talk about is Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was kind of similar to Joe Mixon in that to start the year, he posted a 70-plus PFF rushing grade, 4+ yards per carry, and over 3 yards after contact per attempt in 5 of his 8 games to start the year until week 9. So at the beginning of the year, started out a lot better. We saw a better version of Tony Pollard than we saw the previous year in Dallas. After he hit those 3 marks, those first 8 games of the year, he did not hit them again, only once more for the rest of the season. So he really started to fall off as the season went along. Had a great opportunity share, was getting all the volume, and it really wore him down because Tony Pollard, even prior to 2 years ago, wasn't really a workhorse running back. So to me, with Tajay Spears as banged up as he was to start last season, and now that he's healthy and he's entering year 3, and he really finished the season strong, weeks 15, 16, and 17, he was a top 15 scoring running back, a top 12 scoring running back, in fact, in all 3 of those games, 2 of which Tony Pollard was active for. Is Tony Pollard washed? I don't think so. Is this offense and this backfield probably going to get better and more efficient because Cam Ward's coming in and they have offensive line upgrades? Probably. But I'm worried that this 70+% opportunity share that Tony Pollard had is completely unsustainable and won't keep up. For me, I would rather draft Tajay Spears in redraft, rather draft Tajay Spears in Dynasty, because he's the cheaper of the 2 options, and I do think he could straight up win this backfield without an injury to Tony Pollard ahead of him. And when you have 1,300 career touches and you're 28 years old, and you have a young running back who's been efficient when healthy on the field, who's a better receiver than you too, it's hard to imagine that Tony Pollard's just going to have a monster workload again. And we've already heard the Titans brass say that they don't want to give him that big of a workload too. It was out of necessity. Tajay Spears was banged up as hell the first 10 games of last year. Once he came back healthy, the backfield got a lot closer of a split, and Spears actually was the one who was better, especially when it mattered in the fantasy playoffs. He's played over 60% of the snaps in 5 career games, Tajay Spears. In those 5 games, In 4 of them, he's been a top 15 scoring running back on the week, with Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard active for 4 of those 5 games over his first 2 seasons as well. So Tajay Spears, a very talented running back that I do think could be a huge breakout candidate this year. And Tony Pollard as the incumbent starter who's older, who's starting to hit that wall, the age and touch apex. I would sell him if you're a contender for any second round capital, or better yet, see if you can flip him into Tajay Spears or into a running back with maybe a safer workload, like a Brian Robinson, like an Isaiah Pacheco, like a DeAndre Swift. Even if it costs you something small, I would probably be willing to do that. So to recap our stances on all of these running backs, because I'm not going to sit here and be wishy-washy about this stuff. I want to take legitimate stances on both Dynasty and redraft for all of these players. I'm still very much in on Barkley specifically in redraft, but in Dynasty he's a little pricey. So if you wanted to tier down to a younger running back, I personally made that move, tearing down, quote unquote, to Devon Achane, who's a lot younger, who projects very similar to Barkley from a redraft perspective. Dynasty's the only way I'd be out on Barkley. It's just because he's old, and he is 28 years old with a lot of touches under his belt. Derrick Henry, very much in on in both formats. He's priced appropriately in Dynasty. He's priced appropriately in redraft, and he absolutely could have another monster year. Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor, same thing, priced appropriately in both formats. I'm definitely in on them. Alvin Kamara, definitely priced appropriately in both formats as well. Redraft scares me just a little bit because in home leagues, he goes a little higher than he goes on Underdog. But best ball in Dynasty, I think he's a perfectly fine click where he's going. And then James Conner, at his current cost, in best ball, he goes a little higher, but in redraft and in Dynasty specifically, I do think James Conner is a very solid, I'm trying to win this year, give me a 1-year projection, a swan song for a mid to late second round pick, or maybe even an early to mid second round pick if you really needed a running back that bad. I do think James Conner is worth it. Aaron Jones and Christian McCaffrey, I'm a little bit more wishy-washy on. I would say probably shop them due to their market value, maybe slight fades from a redraft angle as well. And then guys that I'm absolutely actively selling and avoiding from both a redraft and a Dynasty perspective is Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, and Tony Pollard. All 3 of those guys I would sell for mid-second round capital if I was a contender trying to tear things down. If I was a contender still trying to compete, I would use Mixon plus something else. I would use Montgomery plus something else, Pollard plus something else to go up and get a better running back, a guy who's a little bit more stable, a little bit better, maybe a little bit younger, whatever the case is. These former RB1s, to me, could fall off this year. Mixon, Montgomery, and Tony Pollard, and maybe Aaron Jones, Christian McCaffrey as well. Naturally, I'll probably get one of those safe guys wrong, like the Barkley, the Henry, Jacobs, JT, Alvin Kamara, James Conner. But there's no way of predicting who it's going to be. So generally speaking, I'm in on all of them. This is also the current running back ADP for all of the guys I talked about. I didn't really talk about Najee Harris or Austin Eckler or Nick Chubb. They're not really consequential price tags to the point that they would really kill you if they fell off. But technically, yes, Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, and Nick Chubb are around or over the age and touch apex. But Eckler and Chubb I actually kind of like at cost because they're so damn cheap in all formats. And Najee Harris's price tag continues to decline after the July 4th incident, and he's also not quite at the age and touch apex yet. So if you guys enjoyed this video, leave me a like down below. If you want access to some of this data, it will be in our redraft rankings manifesto, which is coming out next week. Our redraft guide, those of you guys that got it last year, let us know what you thought of it down below. Any feedback that you have, what you want to see this year that maybe wasn't in the draft guide, maybe stuff that you didn't like about it last year that you want to see differently, let us know down below. You can get access to our redraft guide by heading on over to flockfantasy.com using the promo code FSE when you sign up. That'll get you access once it does in fact come out, and you guys can stay tuned for the announcement for that. It's probably going to be right in line with when training camp opens, which is going to be on Tuesday. And also, if you guys do enjoy all of the content that we have going on here, like, comment, subscribe. We really appreciate that. And check out Underdog Fantasy to take advantage of some of these draft ADPs that you can get in redraft. Check out our site for Dynasty tools. The trade calculator I showcased to you, Dynasty rankings, Dynasty My Teams feature to see who has some of these players on your respective league mates' teams. That is definitely a great feature to use. So everything available over there on flockfantasy.com. Again, promo code FSE. Annual subs get a free team review that we can break down for you live on the channel. And so much more there. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.